Chapter 9 Teenage Wasteland June 22nd, 1998 Arklay Forest. Judy peeled the mass of sweat-matted hair off his forehead and shifted the backpack. After a week of steady rain, the afternoon heat wielded an oppressive humidity that had transformed their hiking trip into a death march. He squinted down the railway tracks. The air simmered with barbecue grill heat lines. The sun was cooking the creosote out of the railway ties, wafting a nauseating stench into the muggy air. A few steps behind him, Erin groaned. "I think I'm dying here," she said. "Just a little farther. Don't worry." She quickened her pace. Cinders crunched under her hiking boots with the brittle rasp of grinding teeth. A moment later, she was beside him. Her nostrils flared as she took deep breaths through her delicate nose. "We're lost, aren't we?" He loved her voice, that velvety, smooth twang which still bore the evidence of her Georgian pedigree. It was a shame that her accent was fading, steadily transforming into a female version of his dull, uninflected Western speak. He shaded his eyes. Farther down, the railway tracks veered sharply to the right. 2 more bends, and they should be at the quarry. "Nope, not lost. It's just taking a bit longer than I thought," he answered. Gary had told him that it would take an hour. Apparently Gary was one heck of a fast walker. She grabbed his wrist and skipped in front of him. Her chocolate brown eyes narrowed. "You lying to me?" He knew that she wasn't angry yet. Her voice always sped up and rose a few octaves whenever she was agitated or excited. Linda had told him this was a common trait among Southerners. He had no way to be sure about that, though it was a common trait among the Hawthorne family. "Have faith. I've been here a bunch of times." He attempted a reassuring smile, a smile she returned with her outlandishly bad, serious face. "All right." She released his hand. Her warmth lingered on his wrist. "I don't see why we couldn't have just gone to Victory Lake." "It's worth it, I swear." "I bet." She spun and continued down the rails. He slowed his pace, and she continued past him, tall, slender, with straight shoulders and a boyish mess of yellow hair, effortlessly gorgeous. She was a singularity among their school's legion of hyper-feminine cutouts. Her position as school outsider was cemented by the fact that as the daughter of a CDC virologist hired on by Umbrella, she was considered Raccoon City's new blood. New bloods were generally better educated and wealthier than the working-class descendants of Raccoon City's original settlers. Much like the wealthy residents of F. Scott Fitzgerald's West Egg, the newcomers were treated with a fair amount of disdain, especially in old blood strongholds like Millhaven District's Middleborough High. And yet Erin Hawthorne could not be bothered to bat an eye at the abuse the popular girls sent her way. Middleborough's popular girls, living facsimiles with highlighted hair and padded bras, beautiful in the way sunrises were beautiful. Breathtakingly temporary was the term he had coined for them. So many of them were destined to peak at 20 and spend the next 50 years wallowing in their mediocrity. But not Erin Hawthorne, who was fetching in a way that other girls could only dream to be. She was his Southern Belle, the Daisy to his Jay Gatsby. She was 15 feet ahead of him, balancing herself on one of the rails with her arms outstretched. Her back and shoulders were glossy with sweat. Jody closed his eyes. He briefly imagined wrapping his arms around her, linking his hands over that warm, flat stomach. He imagined feeling her short hair brushing against his face, of how it would smell. He imagined bringing one hand up to her jaw, turning that pretty face to meet her lips with his own. "You comin'?" she asked. She had turned to face him and was tottering backward down the tracks. "Yep." "Well, come on then. You're the one who says he knows where he's going." "I know where I'm going," he said, smiling. He stepped up his pace to meet her. She had spun back around and was hopping from one railroad tie to the other, hands in the back pockets of her olive-drab fatigues. Jody had noticed her the very first day of school, a blonde head poking out above the crowd, briskly weaving through the hallway. When they passed each other, her eyes were set forward, his were counting the freckles on her cheeks. They walked together in silence for about a mile. Their friendship had progressed past the stage where the lulls in conversation were painful or awkward. Though with Erin Hawthorne, there was rarely a lull in the conversation. Jody suspected that she came upon it naturally, seeing as how her whole family were talkers. Supper at the Hawthorne homestead was reminiscent of standing with an ear pressed against the birdcage at Riverside Pets. 7 voices, vying for attention at the huge walnut table. It was so different than his regular dinners, consisting of himself, Gary, Linda, and the TV in the background with Jeopardy cranked to full volume. Past the second bend, one more to go and they should see the cut line that led to the old granite quarry, which was flooded with 70 feet of cold, clean water. It had been a party place when Gary and Linda had been young, but the county smashed the bridges leading to it, and so Raccoon City's teenage population found other places to drink Blue Ribbon and catch crab lice. They should have the place to themselves. His stomach flopped over on itself. What was he thinking? They were friends. She hadn't shown any inkling of attraction to him. But he did love her, infatuated ever since their backpacks bumped together in that crowded Middleborough hallway, and the paperback spilled from our open side pouch. The cover was missing a corner, and the spine was reinforced with packing tape, but the title read clearly in black, Art Deco lettering. Tall and lovely Erin Hawthorne read Ernest Hemingway. Tall and lanky Jody Albrecht was spellbound. They were past the third bend. In the distance an old wooden signpost poked out of its leafy cover. His stomach lurched again. He recalled the same feeling the day he had biked up to Victory Lake with Chubb Hartney, intent to dive off Deacon's Point. The sensation could be described as being about 1 part exhilaration to 3 parts testicle-shriveling anxiety. He kept picturing himself jumping short and destroying his legs on the rocky outcropping a few feet above the waterline. Chubb Hartney was a terrible swimmer. Jody would have drowned before anyone could have rescued him. Yet still, he knew that he would dive. "That's the road up there." "Well, it's about time," she answered. Jody smiled to himself, cherishing how she pronounced time, tam. Off the tracks now, out of the sickening coal tar stench, cool under the canopy of trees. The sides of the road were still littered with teenage artifacts, smashed bottles, the skeleton of a rotten lawn chair, flattened beer cans. All were mouldering and half-buried, emerging from the ground like the rising dead. "Are you taking me to a garbage dump?" Jody smiled. "Nope, it's really nice there. I'm gonna kill you." "No you won't, you'll love it." She laughed. It was high-pitched, very girlish, and completely genuine. Erin Hawthorne was incapable of fake laughter. "I'd better, or you're getting a whipping." The path opened before them, revealing the large man-made lake. The clean water shimmered in bright afternoon sunlight. The opposite shore was swampy and littered with fallen trees and abandoned steel trestles, but their side, much deeper, was an untouched jewel surrounded by black, craggy scree. "Oh!" Apparently Erin approved. She stood poised at the ledge of a small bluff with her hands on her narrow hips. She turned her head to the sky and watched as a small hawk tucked its wings and plunged at some unseen prey. The sun caught her hair and shimmered like a halo. Jody took a slow step forward. His mouth was dry. He took another step forward. palms sweaty. "Don't be an idiot." His pace slowed to a stop. Erin was his only friend. He was about to ruin everything. He took his eyes away from her and glanced at the rock wall to his left. Every inch of it was etched with 15 years worth of adolescent musings. BK and MV forever. Led Zeppelin sucks. Latham Highgrad, 71. Joe Gutierrez is a madman. Trudy Schilling puts out. Most of the graffiti was simplistic and meaningless, even to those who wrote it, but not all. GA and LK, 70. Gary Albrecht and Linda Krause, 1970. Gary proposed to her here. They had been dating for 5 months. Gary said he knew he would marry Linda after their first date. Jay Gatsby had reinvented himself and built a fortune in order to win Daisy's love. There was no Tom Buchanan standing between him and his Daisy, only Jodie's own trepidation. He was moving forward again. That summer afternoon at Deacon's Point, he had cleared the outcropping easily. The water had been freezing, invigorating after the deathly plunge down. Jodie was less than a foot behind her now. His pulse matched that of a small rodent. "That water looks so..." She stopped as his arms slid around her. His hands linked around her flat stomach, his bare chest pressed against her spine. Jodie felt her tense. Every bit of her was rigid and unyielding. She was coiling, preparing to flinch away from him. She would spin to face him with those big brown eyes narrowed, accusatory and suspicious. She would ask him what the hell he was doing, and her muscles slackened. Her body yielded to his. Imperceptibly, her weight shifted as she moved into his caress. His pulse quickened. He let out a long breath. Her hair fluttered and swept across his nose, sparking a tremor that raced through his own body into hers. His hand, remarkably steady, slid up her side, up her long neck to her jaw. She sighed softly as he tilted her head. Her eyes were closed. She had such long eyelashes. He bent his head forward and kissed the corner of her mouth. Another contented sigh. Smoothly, he slid around. His belly brushed against hers, and she brought her arms up, draping them on his sunburnt shoulders. He moved in and pressed his lips against hers, could taste her Dr. Pepper chapstick. Her lips parted, and her smooth tongue ran along the inside of his bottom lip. Her fingers whispered through his hair. She pulled away, but her hands stayed where they were. Her cheeks were flushed, her pupils dilated. "Mama was right," she said. "You did like me." His pulse returned to that of a human's. He let out another long breath. "Yeah, I sure do." "Since when?" "Remember when I asked you if you liked a farewell to arms?" "Yeah." "About 30 seconds before that." Jodie laughed and kissed her again. Erin Hawthorne was his, the Maria to his Robert Jordan. "Is this going to change anything between us?" he asked. "Probably." Another smile. "Change is good, isn't it?" "Sure." He slid his hands down her sides and rested them on her hips. He couldn't stop touching her. Deacon's Point didn't have anything on this feeling. They stayed locked together for what seemed like an hour, their bodies warm, pressed together. Erin rested her pointy chin on his shoulder and covered his neck with feathery kisses. They would date, and then one day he would take her back here and propose to her. Before they married, he would buy a hammer and rock chisel and carve their initials high on the rock face. With one last peck, she slipped away from him and adjusted her banana yellow bikini top. "That water looks so nice, and I'm cooking. Let's go for a swim." Judy waved down to the water and grinned. His skin still yearned for her touch. "That's why I took you here." "No, it isn't," she said, laughing. She kicked off her hiking boots and slid out of her fatigues. The other girls thought she was too skinny. He thought that she looked like a dancer. One day he would be able to explore every inch of her. Taking 2 quick steps, she whooped and threw herself off the ridge in a clumsy cannonball dive. She squealed and thrashed around, kicking up a spray of water that shimmered like ice chips. "It's cold," she shrieked, treading water and grinning goofily up at him. "Oh yeah?" Judy knew very well how cold the water could be. The smile fell from his face when a black mass of squalling birds exploded out of the far tree line. They circled overhead for a moment, and then scattered like burnt paper in the wind. He shaded his eyes. On the opposite bank, a dark figure was ambling through the trees, hunched forward like Hemingway's Old Man and the Sea. "Jody?" He glanced at Erin, and then back over at the figure. "Hey, what's wrong?" she asked. The shape, an inky black blob with a white face, splashed through the shallow water. It was following the shoreline, heading toward them. "Someone's on the other side of the pit. There's something wrong with him," he said. Erin's thrashing became more pronounced as she paddled back to the water's edge. It wasn't long before she was standing next to him, dripping wet and brushing her straw-colored hair out of her face. She wrinkled her brow and shaded her eyes as well. "Is he drunk? Or hurt?" "I don't know," Jody answered. A cotton ball cumulus had drifted in front of the sun. Beside him, Erin shivered. The figure continued picking its way through a jumble of scaffolding and dead-fall trees. With the sun partially blotted out, Jody could pick out a filthy pair of blue jeans and a dark jacket. A moment later, the man disappeared behind a screen of young saplings. The wind shifted direction. A faint groan floated toward them. "I think he's hurt," Erin said. "Should we get help?" Jody kept his eyes on the opposite shore. He felt Erin lace her long fingers through his own. "We should go down there." The bent shape, clearly a man, re-emerged, closer to them now. Those dark stains looked like blood. Jody wondered where this guy came from. He didn't look like a hiker. "Do you know anything about first aid?" he asked. "A little, from Girl Scouts." The stranger made an abrupt halt and turned his ashen face up to the ledge they were standing on. "We should go get help." Jody Albrecht was someone who had always known what he did and did not want. He did not want to go down there. "It took us an hour and a half to walk here. Who would we get?" She gave his hand a little squeeze, and then released it in order to pull on her pants and boots. "Besides, there's 2 of us. If he's a bum, he won't try anything." Her boots were on. She was already starting for the small escarpment that would lead them to the man. "Grab the backpack, okay?" Jody let his gaze linger on the man in the trees, and then switched over to his southern belle. There was no sense arguing. Wherever she led him, he would follow.